Welcome to episode 81 of Rubbish Talk with me, Alasdair Meldrum.
And me, Jane Bond.
And I think this week we've got listener news. We've had contact. We're not talking to nobody, Jane.
We're not talking into thin air or the universe. We've actually got listeners. Well, we have got listeners. We noticed.
Of course we've got listeners.
It's really nice.
Sometimes you wonder. Sometimes you do wonder.
It's nice when people come back and make a comment on what we've been saying. And actually, you've got a big comment here, but it's nice to know that what we're saying is actually listened to and, is interesting.
So who was it?
Who came? I thought it was Deborah Sachs, didn't it? She came back?
Yep. So she came back on the AD.
Yeah, and she was talking about, she works for a Spanish company. So Deborah Sachs works for Sachs Consultancy. So she's got her own consultancy business. And she works with a Spanish company who have developed a pre-treatment technology to treat food waste before sending it to AD. Because we were having this discussion last week, weren't we, of the fact that there's all this plastic at the front end and having to depackage it, and also all these takeaway cups that identify themselves as compostable, but not necessarily composted.
Suitable for AD.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, she's saying quite a bit of information. Actually, I've not had a chance to go through it, but maybe there's a future guest for us. I got a good story the other day. I was out with a pal for dinner on Friday night, and he confessed. I'll not name him because he confessed to the fact that he goes to sleep with earpods in, listening to podcasts. And quite often, obviously, once it falls asleep, the earpod falls out. So guess what he woke up to at 6 o'clock in the morning? Myself and you, Jane, trying to remember the word for mad cow disease in the AD episode we did. So that's what
I was frantically looking on Google for what it was.
It all counts as a listen, so there you go. So I don't know what's more embarrassing, is wearing earpods to bed, or whether he's not really listening to the podcast, he's downloading it in his sleep. So there we go. So what news have we got?
Well, actually, this is a good one. It's to do with flip-flops. So a man, his business is making new shoes out of discarded flip-flops, has been made an ambassador for a government loan scheme, and collects broken or waste flip-flops in Southeast Asia and South America. And he uses the plastic for the soles of new sandals made in Spain. So, it's completely international business. And I think his thing here is actually loans and the importance of loans to actually start, for start-up companies. Yeah. So I thought that was quite an interesting one.
They look quite funky. We'll share the pictures.
They do actually. And it's like this rubbish that, sorry, I was just going to say, these flip-flops he's saying just discarded and some are just left on the beach. And you're like, okay, here we go. But yeah, they do.
Here's a use for them. Let's turn them into use. So I've got one that's probably a bit of a contentious one. So the John Muir Trust has put out something about, seemingly they've got a big issue with people taking their relatives' ashes and spreading them on top of various mountains and leaving piles of ashes behind. So they've got a bit of a campaign to say people need to be a bit more respectful about how they do that. Yeah, and without going into a rant, one of my pet peeves when I'm out in the outdoors is when you do see a sort of memorial to somebody that's sort of half-baked and not very, I don't mind seeing a plaque on a, properly constructed wall or a cairn or something, but sometimes you see these things, you just think, what on earth almost gives people the right to do that? It's clear that they're not going back to visit it. So maybe we need to revisit my theories about benches and beachfronts and parks with flowers and benches, which, as we've discussed before, I'm not a particular fan, but my view is you donate a bench for the use by the public. You don't donate a bench so you can have your own personal memorial in the beachfront or the park. But that's a different topic.
That's another rant. But yeah, I must admit, if I was walking up the hill and find a pile of ashes, it would be a bit disconcerting, that thing that you're walking past a dead person. It's kind of like there's a
I'm actually a bit
place,
surprised there is piles of ash. I'm actually a bit surprised, but it's normally at the top of a mountain. It's so damn windy that
it can blown away anyway.
Blow away, so.
Yeah, okay.
But I think it's the usual. I think it's certain mountains that are particularly bad.
Yeah, I've got one about fishing nets, which is quite a good one. They're is this guy who has found a way to convert fishing nets for 3D printing for use in products from motorbikes to sunglasses. So that's quite an impressive. And he says, when I pass a pile of fishing nets, I see piles of money, he says. So he's on the Cornish coast, so presumably there's quite a lot of fishing nets over there. But yeah, so he's been collecting those discarded plastic fishing nets and turning them into useful objects by the sounds of things. Oh, he's got a micro factory. Interesting.
Yeah, no, I read into it, and it was fascinating so seemingly these plastic fishing nets only last for so long, but eventually they get sort of algae and bits in it that the fish then see the nets and can avoid them, and that's why they have to replace them. But the other interesting thing he'd done was he's basically worked out how to fit this all in a container, and what he's trying to do is sell these containers around the world, because this isn't just an issue in Cornwall, it's an issue around the world. So he thinks he can put together a container that can do this for about $500,000, £370,000, and you can send these around the world. So
yeah, kind of a mini recycling plant. Yeah, I think so.
Absolutely.
Anything else?
Well, the next one almost turned into a rant. Well, it probably is a bit of a rant, actually. So there was a BBC headline about Southwest businesses. So businesses in the Southwest have raised concerns about a new tax on packaging and could force them to raise prices. So this is the tax we've talked about before, the extended producer responsibility, where companies that put goods onto the marketplace, into supermarkets, need to pay for the cost of recovering and recycling that packaging. And now that's coming into force. They're having to pay the money, and they're all grumbling about it. But at the end of the day, why should councils pay for disposal of their material? So it is a bit of a, to be honest, Jane, from the public point of view, effectively we're just going to pay higher prices. As producers are going to add it into the cost. Yeah. So we're caught between pay higher prices at supermarket or pay higher council taxes for the council to do the work. So one way or other, producer's going to lose out. But
yeah, somebody's got to pay for it at the end of the day, isn't it?
Well, hopefully it's going to drive producers to think a bit more about the packaging they use and the type of packaging and how we can recycle it better. So in theory, it's a good plan.
See what happens.
And I think that's us, isn't it? So this week we're going to continue our journey into, I probably should have said that at the start, but we're too excited about our feedback from listeners at the start. We're going to continue our waste journeys, as we called them. So this week we're going to cover fridges, and we're only going to cover fridges because I had the pleasure of getting taken round the GAP Alba plant at Bin Farm at Perth last week. So I thought that'd be a great topic for us to cover. So that's the reason we're going to cover fridges.
Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? Your fridge breaks, what do you do with it? But we were looking at how many fridges are produced or thrown away every year. It's quite significant.
According to the figures, it's estimated to be 3 million fridges and freezers discarded each year in the UK.
That's a lot of fridges, isn't it? We thought about that, actually. 3 million fridges. And then we looked at the number of households and how many, what was it?
About 28 million households in the UK. So that means the average fridge is lasting for 9 years. So on the back of that visit, I worked out my fridge in the house is much older than 9 years. I think I worked out it was about 20 years old.
Well, I can beat that.
I'm now at the stage where it's... Are you?
I can beat that.
My story is that the handle on my fridge is one of these ones that's got a bit of a lever, and that breaks the seal to open the fridge. That handle must have broken about 5 or 6 times. And you used to be able to go onto manufacturer and buy a handle, and it's really easy to replace. It's just 2 screws, you put it on and you replace it. Now it's got to the stage where the manufacturer no longer produces that spare part. So now I've got to go on eBay and look for second-hand parts. So it is actually a grey fridge now with this bright white handle. And if that handle breaks again, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do. I did say to the GAP Alba boys, can you keep a wee eye out for a handle for me next time? Get the same model of fridge.
Well, when I moved into our house here, which is 26 years ago this month, actually, the fridge was integrated into the kitchen, and it's still there. It's never broke. And the other, because I've got 2 fridges, because the thing with the fridge, it doesn't fit in pizzas. It doesn't fit the freezer, so we had to buy a freezer for pizzas and beer. So that's another fridge that I've got. But that other fridge does sort of break down a little bit more. I've had 2 fridges in that time, whereas I've only had 1 fridge in the other. So I'm quite impressed with my longevity of my fridge. Never had to do anything with it.
That's quite impressive. I'm sure there are listeners with much older fridges than ours, but they can let us know. So big problem with fridges is they used to contain CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons. And the big problem with these was they were creating a hole in the ozone layer, and that was causing all sorts of environmental issues. So we switched to using hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs, but both these chemicals have a big global warming potential, which is much higher than CO2. CO2. Training and Wamatad in my head for people in the know. So they've got much bigger impact than CO2. So when we recycle the fridge, we need to capture these gases, and these gases are both in the refrigerant that's used to cool the fridge, but it's also contained within the insulating foam of the actual fridge. And they reckon that each old style fridge can contain the equivalent of 1 to 2 tons of carbon dioxide in the form of refrigerant and foam gases. So that's why it's so important. If you think of the number we've got there, 3 million fridges a year. There's almost 3 to 6 million of CO2 just from fridges alone. So it's really important we do it right. So
I'm looking at my fridge thinking, how can I get 1 to 2 tons of carbon dioxide inside my fridge? That's quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I suppose also we're looking at the amount of electricity they use as well, and how much electricity is an old fridge compared to a new fridge.
Well, looking at that, Jane, you should maybe be replacing it. There might be you need to do the sums.
I was just looking at that thinking,
there if it's
60% less electricity, newer ones than older ones. So I'm thinking, not only have I got my problem with me 1 to 2 tons of carbon dioxide plus all that extra electricity, is it, I will have to do my cost-benefit analysis there. Is it worth getting an older new fridge? What happens?
You can do that calculation.
Oh, God, okay, no, I'll have to.
You can do that calculation and get back to us.
I'll ask ChatGPT. I'll get Mia to ask ChatGPT and see, So what happens to a fridge when it gets recycled? What happens to it? We don't just take it and smash it up and that's all. Obviously there's those refrigerants to collect. So what happens then? Come on, Alasdair, you had the big lowdown from GAP Refrigeration.
Well, I had the guided tour, so I've got the advantage.
So you know what happens.
Well, I suppose you've got to start with the householder. So how does it get from? So you got a waste fridge. How does it get from the householder? So a couple of ways. So if you buy a new fridge, the retailer is obliged to take your old fridge back. So quite often they will uplift your fridge. The council will collect as part of a bulky up waste collection normally. And the other opportunity is to take it to your household waste recycling centre site, and that's generally how they're all collected. And then they must all be taken to an approved, authorised treatment facility that can handle the refrigerant material. So generally, they're quite substantial plants. There's only, I can't actually remember the number around the UK, but there's probably only 4 or 5 plants around the UK. The main one in Scotland at Perth has been on fire a couple of times, and that's caused issues in Scotland. Quite often these fridges were getting sent south of the border. But now between Perth and the new GAP Alba plant, there's a bit of extra capacity.
Do you know what? I went to a waste recycling centre a while back and to do an audit, I didn't just go and look at the fridges for the sake of it. So I was doing this audit and was looking at all the fridges that were there. And I said, well, what is the problem with these fridges? And he said, well, the biggest issue is people give us those fridges and they've still got food in them. So they've got, food in the freezers, food in the fridge, and they're all like mouldy and disgusting. So, and also sometimes people hide things in that they're not supposed to put in them, like gas bottles and things like that. He says the amount of stuff you get out of a fridge that shouldn't be there in the first place is quite significant. And I was like, oh, cracky, if you're going to get rid of your fridge, the least you can do surely is take your food out in the first place. And they were also talking about making sure that they're locked as well, so that people don't climb in or kids don't climb in and then they can't get out again. And I was like, okay, we'll make sure they're closed and locked. So first thing is make sure there's no food.
I was of the understanding, I know some councils have the policy that the site I was at the other day, they were removing the rubber seals, but I was of the understanding a lot of councils have the policy they remove the rubber seals for the basis that if a kid does get into the site, they shouldn't have been in the site, but if they do get in the site, they can't lock themselves in the fridge.
Okay, fair enough. There we go. So the rubber seals, so they go for recycling. So they're okay then. They haven't got any CFCs in or HFCs or any of these other acronyms in them with chlorofluorocarbon thingies. So they take those out. Then obviously you look in your fridge, what else have you got? You've got those like little glass shelves or your plastic kind of tray things, your, what do you call? Trays, not trays. Shelves. Get there eventually. Shelves.
Salad tray, meat
salad trays, all of that sort of stuff. Everything needs to go. And all of that stuff can go for recycling, which is at least that's a few ticks. Easy recycling, a few ticks. And then gets the complicated bit. And I'm going to go back to Alasdair for the complicated bit. How do we get the gunky stuff out? The scary stuff, the dangerous stuff.
From the actual practical process, it's actually relatively straightforward. So the fridge gets put onto a conveyor. An operator will then, bottom of the fridge, you'll have the compressor, which if you've ever looked at the back of the fridge, it's got this almost like a football sort of size, not quite a football size, but that's not totally round like a football, but that's what you see at the back of the fridge. So they'll identify that. They've got a drill that's got a suction cup around it. So they drill into that and basically once they're through into the compressor, it sucks off the gas and the oil that's contained within that. And they've got to do that to a certain standard. So they're not even allowed a drip of oil left at the end. They've got to suck it all out. The complicated bit is where that oil goes to and what's done to the oil and gas. But that's sort of later on in the process. So once they've done that, they then just manually bash off that compressor. And it's really physical. It's just done with axes. It's generally screwed on at 2 or 3 points and just an axe, through each point just takes it off. And these compressors then go off for recycling. The oils and the gas is taken ultimately for high temperature incineration, but it needs to be destroyed because it has got that, in terms of ozone and global warming and so on. So that's the sort of physical process. And once you've got that, that's you basically left with the shell of the fridge that goes into on the plant is basically the magic box that does all the shredding and tidying up.
Yeah, so basically it's going to shred all the waste and all that sort of stuff into the aluminium, the steel, takes the plastics away. And I suppose you've still got that potential of the gases in the refrigeration foam and stuff, haven't you? So we need to make sure that when it's being done, it's actually done in a environment to prevent the gas escaping. That still sounds quite complicated, actually.
Yeah, it's one of these plants that's really hard to see. It is a big fancy. The fridge gets lifted up to the top, and in theory, the guys can say, "Well, that's a shredder, and that's this, and this is happening." But in practice, it's one of these magic boxes that you're not quite sure what's happening. But one of the interesting things I thought, which I was not aware of, was that plant can also take. So the expanding foam you use as insulation in buildings.
Oh yeah.
So the thick, 2 or 3 inches. So it's got exactly the same problem, that it's also got these gases in it. So the plant can either take fridges or it can actually recycle that foam as well. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, that is quite good.
So basically they extract the gas from the foam, and as you said, Jane, you're left with the ferrous metal, you're left with the non-ferrous metal, and they split them into different waste streams, and that's all got a value. They're left with a plastic, which is pretty low grade in terms of plastic, but it's still plastic and they can get a value. And then really the foam is the bit needs to be disposed. And at the moment they've been sending that as a solid recovered fuel. So they are using it as a fuel, but it does still need disposed. So in terms of percentage of a fridge that's actually recovered, it's quite. I was going
to ask you that. It sounds quite high, actually.
No, I think that the only bit, I suppose you would say that in terms of waste, you would say the gas is a waste because it's got to go for high temperature incineration. And you could probably argue the foam is a waste because it's got to go for solid recovered fuel. But the rest of the stuff, the ferrous, non-ferrous, and the plastics and the compressors all go for recycling. So, it's all good.
So when they take it at GAP, can they actually, are all of the the fridges for scrap, or do they actually refurbish any of them, or are they just beyond refurbishment by that point?
So GAP have got, this sounds like an advert for GAP,
It does,
actually.
doesn't it, actually?
So they have a big plant down in, I'm going to get this wrong, I think Gateshead.
Yeah,
In my head, it's northeast
yeah.
England. Is down that way. So they have a similar plant for recycling fridges down there, but they also have a reuse facility, a refurbishment unit there. So quite often, so if you buy a new fridge and you decide you don't like the colour, it doesn't fit, or you don't like the space, and you send it back to the manufacturer, because you've taken out the box, they probably don't resell that again, but there's nothing wrong with your fridge. So what you can do is you can buy up these fridges at a really cheap price, and they refurb them, make sure they're suitable, and sell them back at a cheaper price. So they have got that facility for doing that.
So what's the capacity?
The interesting bit about that's what I was going to say, 600,000 fridges per annum, I reckon, and between 8 and 1,000 fridges per shift. So, and that's with a staff of 14.
Yeah, that's a lot of bashing of those compressors, isn't it?
It's a lot of compressor bashing in a day. And they're currently, at the moment, it's interesting so the plant has been built, so the supplier of the equipment has put it in, and they've got to achieve certain throughputs before the GAP will take over that plant officially. So it's still been run it's still the manufacturer equipment that's sort of looking after the plant at the moment until these thresholds are met in terms of processing capacity, which they're almost there, but they're working through some teething problems. Because the plant has only been open for months rather than years.
Yeah. So I suppose we've kind of come to the bit where we say, what is the issue with fridges? And we've looked at the amount of fridges produced per year. What was that, 3 million fridges per annum in the UK, which is, a lot of fridges to sort out. And over 50 million tonnes of e-waste, electronic waste globally is produced per year. These are lots of stats here. And fridges and cooling units make up a significant proportion of those. So, it's really important that we actually treat them and manage them properly, because if the uncontrolled release of those gases would be quite significant into the atmosphere. At the end of the day, we want to do things properly and not end up at the side of the road because somebody couldn't be bothered to take it to the waste recycling centre.
I suppose this is one for all the climate change skeptics out there that, the CFCs were banned on the back of the Montreal Protocol in 1987. So I remember growing up. I was 17 at that time. That shows how young I still am. But the ozone layer, the hole in the ozone layer was a big thing because causes skin cancer in people. You get sunburn. And it's still an issue in the southern hemisphere. We had Debbie from the Falkland Islands here, and one of the things she was talking about was when, although it's not particularly warm in the Falklands, and it can be really windy. One of the things they've got to be really careful of is sunburn, because the ozone layer is thinner in the southern hemisphere, and this is partly due to CFCs releases in the past. So it is one of the things. The ozone layer in the north has actually closed up, so it's a success story for environmental legislation. So. There you go. Wee history lesson for you, June.
Well, it's a history lesson. Although I was slightly older than you when the Montreal Protocol came out, but we won't go into that.
Yeah, we're not thinking that.
We won't go into that one. So I guess we've got our benefits and everything that we've come out. So we've talked about bashing our compressors, metals, the seals, the glass. And what about the cables as well? Because that's the other thing, there's
so the snip
cables.
That was a bit that was a bit of mist. The snip off the cables, and there was also something called capacitors. I didn't quite understand where they were actually in the fridge, but they take them off as well for recycling because there's a wee bit of value to them. And then obviously the oil and plastic. And then, as I said earlier on, we're left with the gases that goes to high temperature incineration, left with the foam. And then, as you talked about earlier on, Jane, the food, the foreign objects, all the stuff that shouldn't be in the fridge in the first place, that needs dealt with and handled.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so that sounds fine. Great. So, is there any problems with this? I mean, you've talked already about, we've talked about refurbishment and reuse. The fact that if we could do that in the first place, but then. We've talked about refurbishment and reuse. More electricity is being used by older fridges and freezers. They've got more CFCs and all that sort of stuff. Can't get any spare parts. So, there's that balance, isn't there, really, between buying a new one and refurbishing your old one. And, my
At
thing
some point,
is,
we're going to have to give up our.
I don't want to give up my
We're
old.
going to have to give up our old fridge eventually. We're going to have to.
No, I can't give it up until it dies.
But I think that comes round to this whole fridge obsolescence thing. Is doing the sums there, I was quite impressed. It was actually 9 years. I actually almost had in my head that people were changing their fridge more frequently than 9 years. So I'm sure there are people. I suppose there's people like us that have had a fridge for 20 years, and then there's people that have had a fridge for, two or 3 years. So yeah. No, I just need a fridge spare part system in the UK to keep getting my door handle. That's the main thing. Some of the challenges they've got going forward is things like, I don't know if you've seen them, there's fridges with sort of computers on the front door that tell you when your food's going out of date and what you've put in the fridge and what you've got and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, have you not seen these? They get these fancy fridges. So
I just open my door and my food's there.
Yeah,
So how does it know?
I think you maybe scan it, or it has a camera inside, or all sorts of stuff. So,
oh my God, that's just too much.
The challenge they've got is then they've got to strip out, that's another bit of waste electrical equipment in there. They've got to strip that out, and potentially there's batteries in there. So when they do shred them down, if they've got a lithium-ion battery in there, you've got issues with that. There has been a lot of problems in the past with fire. I googled fires at fridge recycling plants, and I know the one at Perth gone on fire a couple of times. Once, I believe, because of a gas bottle in a fridge. Not the operator's fault. It was just something that was, well, to a certain extent, it probably was the operator's fault because they should have been checking the fridges. But, ultimately, it was the public that caused that problem. So there is a risk of fire at all these facilities. I think in terms of technology, they know how to do it. They know how to deal with it. I suppose they're, future gazing and think, what's the next thing? What's the next thing a manufacturer is going to put into a fridge that's going to cause us a problem for recycling it?
I'm quite impressed with this, computer thing. Crikey, I can't even struggle with computer work. Never mind a computer at home and checking my stuff.
Yep.
But what I've always wanted was one of these, these big ones where you get an ice making machine on it. That's just like ultimate.
You get an ice making machine in the drawer and a cool water.
No, well, I haven't, but, because mine's like a box, mine's a fridge.
No,
it's nothing fancy. But I've always fancied one of those.
You could invest in a new fridge for one of these, Jane.
No, my fridge still works. It's like, maybe I'm buying a new one for the sake of it. So, but I guess one of the things we really need to stress to people is that if you buy a new fridge, the company you buy it from are obliged to take it back. Not because they're nice, it's because it's legislation and regulation. So if they say, oh no, we can't do that, then they're obliged to do it. So you need to make sure that they take it back. Or, and I think that's some things that people perhaps don't know as much. Same with cookers and other things. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I think one of the things, just while I remember, one of the other things they mentioned that is causing them concern going forward is some of the newer fridges are using a totally different type of insulation that's causing problems to put them through the plant. So they're having to work out. And I suppose I bet this is back to the, we don't really seem to have joined that a bit up between manufacturers and the practical reality of recycling these things. At the end of the day, the fridge recycling are just dealing with what gets thrown at them rather than having a bit of a joined up thinking and thinking, how could we make it easier for ourselves?
Well, that's with everything, isn't it? It's not just fridges. It's like, all sorts of stuff. Manufacturers do all this fancy stuff and think it's fantastic. And then you get to the end and it's like, right, okay, how do we deal with this? Okay.
So I think that's us done our journey through fridges. And when we're talking fridges, I think we mean fridges and freezers as well, just for clarity there. It's the same principle applies. So, rant of the week. Jane, you've got good news? Is it good news?
Well, I think so because there's this campaign by Transport Scotland about litter, and I've been seeing it quite a bit on Facebook because I like my Facebook. I'm of that generation that likes Facebook. So
no, have the kids not told you yet, Jane, that
I'm too old?
The kids not told you that nobody does Facebook anymore.
Well, my age group, my people do Facebook. You know, I like my Facebook, although it's just full of adverts. But anyway, and I was sharing some of these with some of my my friends, my Facebook friends, who are also my friends as well, not just sort of people in the ether. And a lot of them were liking this and coming back saying, yeah, I can't believe the amount of, you know, McDonald's wrappers and KFC wrappers you just see chucked out of the car doors and all this sort of stuff. So yeah,
So what's the
I'm
campaign?
liking that. Oh, sorry.
What's the campaign to do?
It's roadside litter. So we'll add this link on. It's Traffic Scotland, and it's looking at stopping it. You know, basically it's saying that our workers are spending time picking up your rubbish on the sides of the roads. You know, which kind of does risk road workers' lives potentially, and also closing lanes of traffic to actually pick up people's rubbish. You know, that's sort of, and Keep Scotland Beautiful are also looking through this as well, or also looking at this. So yeah, I just think that's quite a positive thing as well. I totally agree with you. If you put the stuff in your car in the first place, then you know it's still there. You just take it home and put it in a bin. It's not difficult. But I remember being on a road and this car had stopped, and you know outside was this packet of McDonald's stuff that he'd obviously eaten and put outside the car. So I knocked on the window and I said, "Excuse me, I think you've dropped your rubbish." He said, "Oh yes. Honest, I'm going to take it back with me. You know, I've just put it out of the car because it smells a bit." I didn't go back and check. I thought it was quite brave of me. I thought it was quite brave.
I did a video a few years ago, the A70, and there was literally a bag every 50 yards of rubbish. And it was actually, I thought it was a council cleaning. It was actually a volunteer had done it. I might share it. I'll dig it back out and share it. I found it the other day. I'll share it on TikTok, on the rubbish.tiktok. But it's just appalling the amount of stuff there. But there is hope. The Scottish Government have now published a National Litter and Fly Tipping Year 2 update and Year 3 action plan. Be totally honest, I've not read it yet. If I'm being really honest, I'm probably not holding out much hope either. We seem to talk about litter and fly tipping and produce reports, but we don't actually seem to do much about it. That's maybe a bit of a cynical, ranty view, but we'll maybe have a good look at that and maybe we'll talk about that in one of the future episodes. So I think that's us for today. Apart from next week, we're going to have Amanda Young on, PhD student at University of West of Scotland, and it sort of links in with what we've talked about. She is doing her PhD on bulky uplifts, which leads into fly tipping. And what's intriguing me a little bit about chatting to her is she's looking at human behaviours and why people, you know, maybe she'll give me an insight as to why people chuck litter at the car and don't take it home, which I'm not holding that much hope, but you never know.
You always think we planned this, Alasdair, to follow on.
So that almost linked together well.
Absolutely.
So there we go. See you next week.
Yeah, bye. See you next week.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. See you again next Thursday at 4 p.m. Don't forget to follow, share with friends, and send us your feedback at hello@rubbishtalk.co.uk.